This is Cast of Wonders, the young adult fiction podcast featuring stories of the fantastic. Welcome. Episode 157, February 15, 2015. This week we bring you the conclusion of Jennifer Noel Welch's The Seal King, narrated by Paul Graham. You can find Jen and Paul's biographies and links to their webpage and Twitter accounts in the introduction to the last episode or in our show notes. But now, we've a tale to tell.
Rattle, 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 rattle. Lou's forehead hurts where it rests, mashed against the keel. And tracing the source of the sound, her brain awakens with a pinch. The coat is wrapped around her shoulders, and somewhere a steel cleat is vibrating. Raising her head, she remembers. The skiff, the size of a tiny teacup, spinning lazily toward the horizon. Are those really the first stars? Had been her last thought, before her eyes swam and the darkness swallowed all. In the stern, the Seal King hugs his curled legs, shuddering uncontrollably. His eyes lock on her face. "You did it," she whispers. "How did you—" Forming the words, he seizes, his voice fluttering into her head instead. "Swam. I had trouble pulling you back in. Sorry." He nods at her side, and Lou finds a bleeding scrape above her hip. Coming sharply back to himself, she notices that his features are tinged green with cold. "You're sick." No, just but the water's still warm from the summer." His thoughts hold no judgment, only a statement of fact. "Without my skin, I freeze." She is shrugging off the coat already, pushing it back to him. "You knew that, and you—" "Turn the boat around," he says, finding his voice. "The water will take us right to it. We don't even have to row." "My loss is not your burden. Turn us." "Look how close we are," she shouts, finding her hand toward the distant hump of land, low and symmetrical. When he regards her with confusion, she continues, the familiar stiffening coming into her throat. "My granny was my colony, the only one who understood me. Why would she tell me of the blue tide if I wasn't meant to see it?" Kells squints over the bow. She hears him exhale, long and slow. "Very well. Each of our lives is our own." Lou flips the end of one oar over the stern to steer them, hesitating only to press his frigid hand where her words can't make the thanks. Stars above, now, and stars below. Protected by the island's lee side, the skiff noses through glossy blackness, Kells standing in the bow. Despite the resentment he has expressed towards his human form, Lou notes he has found the balance of his legs. "My eyes are different," he says. "I can see farther above now. The sky is deep." "How deep?" Lou, leaning on the steering oar, considers the glimmering sprawl of the heavens. "I don't think anyone knows. Humans used to make up stories about the sea. Giant monsters, strange creatures. Funny, now we've turned to outer space." "Is that so?" She smiles. "I never knew what was swimming in my backyard." She lets the boat coast for the last 5 yards, then beaches it on the island's shoal of fine pebbles, water lapping at their ankles. They drag the shell past the scalloped line of detritus left by high tide. "I'm here, standing on it," Lou murmurs. In the light from the full moon, the slope looms above them, a handful of wind-sculpted trees here and there among the whorls of silvery grass. Just as she imagined, a wild place that countless storms had ravaged, given over now to the hushed sigh of bivalve and wavelet. "The sea has blessed this place," Kells says. "Yes," she thinks. "There could be no fakery here, where all life is pared down to its rarefied bones." How long had it been since a human touched this land? Decades? Centuries? She summits the hill first, finding, as if in answer, a ring of standing stones set into the flat knoll. "Sentinels," Lou says. Kells joins her. "Made by whose hand? Selkie? Human? Both?" she says. "Who knows?" Down the opposite windward slope, gradates away from them in pale shallows, then darker depths. She points. "That's where it will come. The blue tide." He looks back behind them. You'll have a long return to make alone. I'll know Granny was right. That's all I want. You'll have the rest of your life in your own skin, back where you belong, she says. When it's over, the sun will show me home. Then you do have a colony, he says. I don't know. She sits next to him, against one of the granite spurs to wait for the turning of the tide. I watch everyone drudging through the halls at school. My mom falling asleep in front of the TV. My dad, who doesn't really talk. I'm not the same. I can't stop myself from wondering, is this all I should expect? Is this what life's for? She felt the familiar hysteria fidgeting beneath her sternum. Only Granny had been able to comfort her when it came. Our restlessness is why we're drawn to the sea, the old woman was fond of saying. Though the water smothers our sight and sound, we can only make up our dreams about it from the outside, can't we? Just once, before the end, Lou had noticed wetness on Granny's lashes. If one could slip beneath and breathe oneself a part of it, how could anyone resist dwelling in that peace forever? Kells speaks, breaking her concentration on the horizon line. Families bring us into the world. Finding kin is different. He combs the grass with his fingers. I was a bastard, but for a time, I was a king. She looks away, afraid to distract him from continuing. My mother found her soul kin in Kryn, a Selkie from another tribe. Displaced by a storm, our territory codes forbid coupling outside one's tribe. Kryn's presence brought tension into the colony, and he was forced to leave. When my mother's belly swelled with me on the next tide, she knew she couldn't follow him, vulnerable and alone. So she sought help from the king. He had been a friend. And he and my mother loved each other in their own way. Knowing his fondness could easily be mistaken for more, he granted her the favor, taking my mother as his mate, and claiming credit for me. No one would have known I carried a foreigner's blood. She sees his face darken. Except, half a moon ago, Rannick led a hunting party far from our colony. From another group of Selkies, they heard of an elder, Kryn, who on his deathbed rambled about my mother, to whom he thought he'd given a pup. Rannick recognized what had happened, and it was over. Banishment is death. You're alive, she says. Kells shakes his head. A Selkie's skin is his soul. A tribe takes it away knowing it will call us back to the sea to drown. If the blue tide lets you return, I will fight to convince them. But without my pelt, they will not recognize me as an equal. I'll go there with you. To risk your life, like you did in the channel? It's my choice. What is it about you? He says. You're so young, you don't even know the world you're trying to leave. She finds her fist clenching. My world is... She jumps as he grasps her shoulder suddenly, inclining his head. Listen, he says. She strains, hearing only a breeze lifting the treetops. The tide has turned. Gazing out towards the water, Lou clambers to her feet. It's happening. Look. Below them, an aquamarine sliver is shimmering, tracing the edge of the underwater drop-off with exploratory fingers. The blue tide, she says. It's here. Running down the slope and charging into the water up to her knees, Lou suddenly stops. 100 points of turquoise light agitate into brightness when she breaks the water's surface again, this time with her hand. The luminous specks, like the rim of eyes on a scallop, cling to her skin, and tears spring into her eyes. Phosphorescence. Jelly creatures. That's all it was? Kells stops short at the water's edge, staring at her extended hands. An old human myth, explaining something they couldn't understand. Silly tales to amuse a child, Lou thinks. Blue tides, Selkie songs, her doddering granny, now dead and gone. No! Her voice surges with anger. It can't be! The blue tide will follow behind. If there's any chance... She plods forward. Lou, Kells has followed, wincing at the water encircling his waist. You'll drown. I have to try. He hollers at her again. I have nothing to lose. To go down, not returning, not seeing the sky again, that does not bother me. But for you, Lou! She pulls free from his hand, striking with her arms against the resistance of the water. 10 strokes out, her feet leave the island. 20 strokes out. No longer sensing Kel's behind her, she takes a last breath and kicks down, fighting the air's claim on her body. Give yourself over. Give up all your breath. And maybe that stream will enter you. A new plane of coldness brushes her face, and she opens her eyes upon bright blue veins streaming through the sediment before her. Forgetting herself, she gasps with surprise. The light meets her lips, dissolving the thumping ache in her chest. And whether it is death or liquid breath filling her with song, she cannot tell. Fathoms deep, the Seal King dreams he is a pup again, dozing in the old kelp grove, sunlight slanting through the brown ribbons. Something nudges the side of his face, and he jolts awake to find himself in an azure haze. His cheeks on the ocean bottom, he had followed Lou, fighting his lungs' agonized clamor and the coldness tightening around his skull. But then, you will hear the song. Some gentle drop moves in his chest. The old music is back in his ears. His vision clears. Not far away, Lou hovers, her feet pointing delicately toward the sand, her face crowned by the wreath of her hair. He has never seen a human form so beautiful. She beams, her tears one with the sea, and peers beyond him to the open waters. Please, she whispers into his mind. I love it more than ever. Show me? He looks down. His body is still human, but the Selkie gracefulness has returned. Hope buoys his heart. With a grin, he takes her hand, and they are racing out beyond the islands, beyond the reef, to the deeps. They revel with abandon. He lets his seal nature emerge, playing the merman, showing her gardens of lavender anemones and sands as soft as fur. He catches her flying body, riding the current in a laughing spin. When a rough surge sends them tumbling, they come to rest with Lou's arms around him and his nose buried in her hair behind her ears. As they separate, their lips brush as unconsciously as a wave folding onto the land. He forms a circlet of golden green popweed for her hair and surprises her with a cave lined in glittering quartz, breaks open mollusks, reveling in her reaction to the tastes and textures. They race across boulder fields and canyons. Only once does she stop to marvel at the distance they have come. Your home water? Is it far? How far is far? He grins, holding out a hand. But reaching to take it, she glances up. Two shapes are watching them. Slick fur and whiskered faces, wise black-brown eyes, taking in the levitating pair, joined by hands. Look, a human that breathes, and the one shunned. Kel starts at the sight of a wound torn in the larger Selkie's side. We have to keep on, says the other, and muscle-propelled, the watchers dart away, dissolving into the distance. Those were tribal elders, Kel says. He frowns. Time is shorter than I thought. We must go. The absence of singing impresses him before anything else. Where hundreds of voices in the colony would have been ringing out in chorus, he can sense only hushed murmurs. Rannoch has broken them already, he thinks. This is your kingdom? Lou asks. It was, he says. She glides to look over the edge of rock, and her eyes widen at the sight so familiar to him. A massive crater, extending down through jagged ledges, thronging with Selkies. Like a coliseum. She glances at his body. There are so many. Without your skin. He draws his fingers into his palm, feeling only frailty there. I know. What will you do? Go down and reclaim my pelt? I have no other choice. All right. When she moves to clear the crater's edge, he puts out a hand. Alone. Why? He has come to recognize that defiance on her face. More Selkie-like than she knows. Your presence as a human won't help. Whatever happens, I'll bring you back to the boat. We'll both return. Yes, before. An image of a floating, orange-haired body escapes from his mind before he can prevent it. Before the dawn ends, he finishes, gesturing to their water-breathing forms. If his darkest thoughts have transferred to her psyche, there is no indication on her face. She accepts his hands, ushering her into a rocky cleft. If they murder you? She asks. There would be no purpose. I'm dead to them already. He squeezes her hand. But I promise, before the blue tide recedes, I'll bring you home. I owe you that. Even though I'm human, she says, I know now what it is to be both. He hovers a moment on the crater's rim, studying the look of concentration on her face. Then he swims down. Kells immediately locates Rannick at the grotto's center, with no one but Viren beside him. He has driven off the elders then, Kells realizes. At the moment he spies his pelt around the bull's shoulders, his stomach twists sharply, like a caught fish. For an instant, those plush dark folds are all that compel him. Halfway to the bottom, his presence draws gurgles of surprise from a nearby Selkie and a calf. Others turn, and the gray bodies begin to circle quizzically. The stares, like pinpricks, on his sprawl-limbed body. Him, the old king's changeling. Bare, yet he lives. A Waterland walker? But look, he breathes. Closer now, poking with bristled snouts. Curious. Among them a voice, afraid to hope, pipes up. Kells has come home. Could I have a chance after all? Kells thinks. He can imagine the spectacle he presents. An angular boy man with black sheen hair. But behind the colony's fear, he can sense wonder stirring. A voice thunders from below. Are we a haven for deceivers? Rannick whirls, catching the attention of the assembly, his nostrils wrinkling in disgust. I warn you, do not be taken by this liar a second time. Rannick, Kells hears Viren caution from her mate's side. The outcast breathes. Illusion! Land magic! Kells can hardly concentrate. So close is he now to the cloak of his own fur. No one can take from another the skin in which they were born, Rannick. I travel here at the will of the ocean itself. Listen, says Rannick with a bitter laugh. The whelp demands his disguise. Murmurs of agreement toss back and forth above him, and Kells stiffens as Rannick draws close. What is he, this body? The old bull noses intrusively at Kells' spine, and it is all he can do to avoid crying out and grasping like a newborn for that part of him that flutters by his shoulder like a live thing. Inefficient. Protectionless. Rannick's hind claws rake across the small of Kells' back, and for a moment, he thinks he hears Lou's voice above him. Ignoring the tang of his own blood in the water, Kells calls out, It is not my blood that makes me who I am. Nothing has changed. Right you are. You remain a liar. Rannick rears up to his full length. A liar who in 12 moons did nothing to expand our territory. The Selkies close by are averting their faces, but they're still listening, Kells thinks. I haven't lost them yet. He presses forward, projecting his thoughts to the upper ledges. This is what it's about? Not bloodline after all, but territory? What plenty results from greed and tribe warring against tribe? Not more to eat, but fewer mouths to feed. He feels their dark gazes back upon him, the old loyalty emerging. It was not my father's way. It is not our way. Hush, outsider, Viren hisses. And then, with a bulleting rush of muscle, she and Rannick have slammed Kells against the crater wall. Half-breed, the bull taunts. Your rags are no use to me. I'll send your hide on the outgoing tide. You'll stay and watch it dissolve in the day orb's light. Stay? They would hold him here? And then, Kells' dread spills the words from his mouth. No! Destroy my skin, but she must return. She, Rannick scoffs. Mother? Mate? You have no one. This colony will prosper long past the memory of you. The bastard son, do you hear the waters turning, imposter? Do you feel it? With Viren's bulk pinning him low against the rock, Kells notices, for the first time, how the sky circle has lightened above them. Then Rannick shrugs his pelt from around his neck, shoots upwards and sets the garment free. The colony quiets, and Kells' heart keens. The mantle waves away, further with each moment, a dark void against the surface. Watch the dawn take it, Rannick cries. lofty light in his eyes. But like an arc of light, a girl shoots across the silvery sky, catching the yielding pelt in her arms. With uncontrolled speed, Lou flies to Kells, racing downwards, flinging the skin over him and sprawling headlong over the sand. And there is a hush, like the soft, fragrant flank of his mother, under her flipper, where no roughness could ever be. The velvet cape enfolds him, and he is home again. He tests, and yes, there are the webs between his claws. There is the contained might of his tail. He opens his eyes, and the colony resumes its song. His skin! Regained! The king! The king! Rannick's roar splits the melody. He is not your king. Kells whirls to find that Viren has already ground Lou into the grotto floor. Before he can think, he has barreled into the other seal, striking with his teeth again and again. Viren balls in panic and bolts, streaking unbalanced over the rim. He turns to find Lou dumbstruck, taking in his new form from nose to tail. She scrambles against the rock as Kells, back in touch with the power of his body, takes his place before her. I want my kingship returned. He glares fiercely at Rannick. You had no right. You never had a right. You've already lost everything, the bull retorts. At this, the Selkies' voices resound as one from the walls. No, you have sought for yourself alone, Rannick. Though you are born of our blood, we do not know you. Moments ago, this was a man, Rannick bellows. When the singing continues, he rockets into the Seal King's right flank. Kells' side explodes in pain, and in a frenzy they roll, jaws fastening and shaking. Then the bull's teeth clench deep into his neck. No! Lou shouts, wrenching free. Suffering the tearing of his flesh, Kells knocks the elder clear with his tail. Rannick, he pants, rising, haggard. Stop this madness. The Selkies echo around them. You are offered mercy, Rannick. Take it. This colony will heal. Shaking with rage, Rannick sneers. And let him muddy our path. Your skin may be your own, but I promise I'll take it from you piece by piece. With a roar, Rannick sets upon him. A fury of adrenaline courses through Kells' limbs, and he loses himself momentarily, savaging the older Selkie's body with his claws. Coming back to his senses, he discovers Rannick tiring, one flipper dangling half free. Blood clouds the water. Don't make me, Rannick. Yield, Kells says. The fallen elder lurches upright, his ripped muzzle twisting in a grin. I will not yield. His gaze drifts sideways. And if I cannot kill you, I will do the next best thing. Setting his head, the bull courses toward the girl with his remaining strength. Kells sees Lou draw her knees to her chest in fear and cries out, his every fiber seizing at the impact. But Rannick's massive body inexplicably lifts, floating upwards in a dead spiral, revealing Lou, his human girl, her fists around the silver shucking blade's hilt. Her smiling eyes meet his a moment, before following her departed breath up to where the gold of dawn has just broken the blue tide's spell, and she is gone. Current, pulling on their bodies, dragging against them, but Kells fights it, muscles afire, streaking through the middle waters, past the last traces of the blue tide, now expended and receding, past the reef, to cast her onto the pebbled shore of the island. He has shed his skin once more, all cold legs and hands now, pulsing upon Lou's heart as he has seen the humans do. Water dribbles from her mouth. Gone. She is gone, like the night orb, like the scent of his mother, like the foolish tide that led them from the land. On the barnacle-scabbed beach, he rubs her in the folds of his mantle over and over, and as the full force of the sun slants over the horizon, he feels her limbs twitch. She shudders and coughs, her face full of disbelief and pain in the coppery rays of morning. I don't have to wonder anymore, she gasps. Where I belong? What life is for? Tears stream into her wet hair. His sob is a bark in his throat, and she is caught in his kiss. Miss Lou, they call her. The lady running the corner store with the milkshakes and the jars of penny candy is one of the young who stayed, of which in the village there are few. Was she married? She acted married, but no one had seen her wed. Through the years she had lovers come and peaceably go. But whether they never got close enough or whether she favored her solitude more, they never knew. She waited customers at the breakfast counter and sewed doll clothes for the local children and kept up the flowers by the docks where the boatmen ate their lunch. In middle age, she bought back her grandmother's house with the narrow steps down the hill slope to the foot of the sea, where there was a tiny dock and beside it a tiny boat. The locals paid scant attention to the island, not much more than a low hump of earth, grass, trees, and stone rising out of the Atlantic. Nothing there but bird droppings, a man said to his son from their lobster boat passing through on the far side of the channel. Can't stop. Too busy. Oh, and that story about the blue tide? That was just a fable. But month after month, year after year, she saw him, leaving the fabric of her land bed, no matter who shared it, leaving the gray-shingled house with the evergreen shutters, rowing out, though she could never be a part of his world again. That was all right. For that was her great secret, her great surprise, discovering after he had pulled her from the sea that he could return. Each time, walking up the slope to meet her, carrying his skin. Each time, laying her on the grass amongst the standing stones, beaming, smelling of that beloved foreignness, tasting of the tide. They laughed like children, girl queen and seal king, and the moonlight melted all else away. Out of all her life, and for all her life, that would be the best part. For the girl with the apricot-colored hair, it would be enough to know, at the end of her story, there would be a full moon and an outgoing ebb and a note, reading, "When I am too old to keep on, take my little boat and push me out to the arms of the deep. Let the current carry me where going out meets coming in, and the blue tide will take me to my home, to my soul, to the sea."
Yesterday was Valentine's Day, a holiday both loved and loathed. Some people like that the calendar sets aside a special day for us to appreciate the partners in our lives. Others complain they don't need greeting card and chocolate companies telling them when to make the object of their affections feel special. It always amuses me that there are as many different reactions to a holiday about love as there are ways to be in love. And that's what I see in Valentine's Day. Not an opportunity or an obligation to a particular loved one, but a day to celebrate or think about or critique the role love as an emotion plays in our lives. There's no right or wrong way to answer that question. Maybe you pine for someone in particular, and Valentine's Day gives you the extra motivation to take that first step. Or maybe you're quite comfortable with where you are and who you're with, and the holiday is a chance for celebratory high fives and business as usual. Fiction and art make a big deal about love, as everything from motivation to justification. It comes in infinite intensities, expressions, and variations, from romantic to carnal, platonic to patriotic. None are wrong, none are right. Take or leave the chocolates and flowers, but there's no denying this cornerstone of emotion is worth some thought one day a year. Join us next week for a change of pace with a very funny "This Is Your Problem Right Here" by David Steffen. If you've enjoyed this episode, please lend a hand in supporting podcast fiction. Leave us a review on iTunes or Facebook, share the episode with your loved ones, or talk about us on Twitter. We're @CastOfWonders, and we love to respond. And please consider making a donation to the show using the PayPal link available at the top of our website. You can make a one-off payment, or better yet, sign up for a monthly subscription. Your donations help pay our authors and keep the servers running so we can bring you the best in young adult audio fiction week after week. Every little bit helps, and you have, especially now, our heartfelt thanks. Cast of Wonders is a production of Wolfsbane Publishing and is brought to you by the creative team of Barry J. Northern, our publisher, Ellen Sale, our audio producer, Jeff Height, our assistant editor and slush reader, and I remain, as always, your humble editor and host, Marguerite Kenner. Our episodes are released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. Share it, but don't change it or sell it. Our theme, Appeal to Heavens, is by Alexi Nov from musicalley.com. Thanks for listening.